Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Man, this year is racing past, isn't it? And is it just me, or is the speed of time going even quicker now? I figure either the Earth is spinning much, much faster than before, or I'm simply getting older. I suspect that it's the latter. But I digress. On today's show, I want to return to another topic we've mentioned recently, which is a zero trust approach to cybersecurity. And cybersecurity, let's not forget, is a $100 billion industry. And we're seeing stories on our timelines and news feeds almost every hour of every day about the cost of phishing schemes, data breaches, and so many other nasty exploits out there. And most recently, Baltimore racked up nearly 18 million after recovering from a ransomware attack that shut down numerous city departments. So while the market is crowded and there are hundreds of solutions to prevent an attack, there is one risk that many people and many businesses overlook. And that one risk should be the top of the list. It's the traditional web browser. I think most companies will have Internet Explorer, but a lot will have Chrome and Firefox too. But when it comes to browsers, few, if any companies, take the time to thoroughly scrutinize or vet their options, and many just leave it to default settings of whatever it comes with when you install it. And the browser is critical for many aspects of business, but many companies still rely on that free version vulnerable to threat actors, making it the most expensive software that they have. So today I invited Authenticate founder Scott Petrie onto the show, who is a 20-year plus Silicon Valley veteran and CEO of Authenticate. And I want to learn more about how the web browser is an aberration in the IT software stack and try and explore the true cost of this seemingly free tool. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little more about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Neil. Great to speak with you. My name is Scott Petrie, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Authenticate. Authenticate is a California-based company, and we build a product called Silo, which is a virtual browser that runs in the cloud. And while that might sound a little bit esoteric, hopefully through the course of the conversation, it'll become pretty clear what that really means and why it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it really is cool. And one of the reasons I'm really excited to get you on today and talk about this, because I think we're all seeing stories are published on an almost hourly basis now about the costs of phishing schemes, data breaches, exploits, and so much news and noise about this at the moment. It's making a lot of business leaders very nervous too. But while the market is so crowded with hundreds of solutions all rushing to prevent an attack, there's one risk that many people are overlooking. In fact, it should be the top of their list, which is the traditional web browser. And you kind of alluded to it a few moments ago, but can you expand on that?
Yeah, sure can. And I think you had an interesting word in there when you said noise out in the environment, because in this hyper-connected, always on, everything we do is, by definition shared with a whole bunch of other resources and passing through a whole bunch of other places. The security, the privacy, the risk equation has gotten really, really complicated. And there's no buzzword that the industry doesn't like, right? And there are a lot of vendors out there touting solutions that are, cure-alls or fix-alls or trying to use fear. And as you point out, Neil, more and more articles about the latest exploit or the latest data leak or the latest cyber attack against an organization or, user data leaking out. It's maddening. But we seem to be taking it for granted because behavior hasn't changed and, the markets are healthy and security companies are continuing to get, positive valuations. But I don't think the security story has gotten any better. We're still using the very same browser, accessing internet resources over the exact same protocols that were built in the 1980s. I mean, we live in the browser when we sit at our computer. It's the de facto application that we use for anything we're trying to do, whether it's our work or paying bills or, wasting time looking at videos or engaging on, social media forums. Any computer, any device you buy comes with a browser built into it. And we're we're desensitized to just connecting to the browser, putting credentials in, and getting after it, doing our thing. But that entire solution, that whole stack from the browser to the web server to the protocols that are defined to exchange information, they were built back in the 1980s in academic research institutions with the intention of allowing research students and scientists to exchange technical documentation. And the architects of that solution, one is your fellow countryman Tim Berners-Lee, right, had no idea that the web would become what it became. He said we designed the World Wide Web in a safe environment, and I think he's used the word abhorrent, the way the protocols have been extended and how it's funneled a massive industry around advertising and monetization of people's data, et cetera. It's been possibly the biggest societal change ever and a great boon. But the technologies that have underpinned that were not designed with any concept of anonymity, security, reputation scoring, or even management capabilities as it applies to business. So, today with those headlines you reference, business is struggling to throw money at the problem, right? They're spending more than $100 billion per year, regardless of the market research firm you read, more than $100 billion spent per year trying to secure this web environment. But they're basically layering technology in places everywhere except the browser that their users are using to access the web.
I'm so glad you highlighted this because, like you said, the humble web browser is critical for almost every aspect of business in every organization and across every industry. And yet, like you said, most companies today rely on that free version that's vulnerable to threats. But it makes it, ironically, of course, it's a free piece of software, but it makes it the most expensive software that they have. So from the businesses that you talk with and the people that you talk with on a regular basis, are they aware of these risks?
It's such a great, there's an anthropologist, a future anthropologist somewhere who's going to do a study on this, right? This is the canonical example of us taking something for granted, right? That we know can potentially harm us, that can cause us harm. I've spoken, the company is 9+ years old, and we've spoken to a lot of CIOs and CISOs about exactly this. And I give them a scenario. I say, imagine we're having this conversation 20 years ago. And I tell them that I can deliver you the single most powerful innovation that your business has ever seen. You are IT. 20 years in the past, IT was defined as a function to take compute technology and apply it to the business so business can get a competitive advantage. Well, I'm going to give you the single most powerful innovation that's going to give you significant competitive advantage. It'll give your users real-time access to any information that they want on any topic in any language or format that they wish. And it's going to be available freely to all of the users. It's going to give them the ability to access transaction services for things like reservations or ordering a book or buying a ticket on an airline without having to go through complicated intermediaries. Direct access to the vendors. Give you collaboration tools that allow people to create ad hoc work groups and share information through messaging, through shared data, through video conferencing, or teleconferencing like we're having now. And it's a platform for business applications to be pushed down to the desktop without installing any additional software, without training your users or disrupting the current environment. Sounds great, doesn't it? The only thing you have to do, Mr. CIO, is open up your firewall and allow arbitrary third-party code to enter your environment and execute on the end device. That's all you have to do. And there's not a single CIO or CISO that would make that trade.
Yeah.
Because they were back then all about prevention, putting up the barriers, controlling the compute environment, and locking out anything that was not theirs or validated. But that's exactly the environment they live in today. Every time a user clicks a URL and views a web page, arbitrary third-party code, whether it's from pick a site, the New York Times or BBC News, right? Plus the advertising networks, plus the analytics package, plus the other things that are injected into that HTTP stream, the references to images on remote servers or videos that might play off a common thing. All of that is code that enters into the environment and executes on the local device. That's what they've signed up to. And so I don't think the realization is there. The browser is a thing that has become a necessary evil. They take it for granted. And this is why we see so much money being spent everywhere except the browser to try to clean up messes after they've occurred.
And it's fascinating, like you just said there, that traditionally companies all over the world have locked everything out that isn't theirs, assuming that everything that is theirs is safe. Yeah. And I think it's only recently we're starting to talk more and more about zero trust approaches. And we've talked about the problems with traditional browsers and how they run on blind trust. But can you tell me more about how you approach this problem with a browser for a zero trust web?
Yeah, that's the great transition, and the tag that the browser runs on blind trust is absolutely true, right? It's requesting a payload from a website and it's executing that code without any relationship or validation a priori. It's like letting anybody into your house that is walking by, regardless of any form of screening. It's amazing. So we started the company with that observation that the browser is basically blindly trusting anything that it's passed, and we recognize that there is a growing industry around technologies being deployed to detect the exploit after they've entered the network or after they've reached the device. It's like the customers are fighting a rear guard action. They're detecting after the fact, trying to clean up the mess, once it's come into their environment. And so we stepped back and said, how could we build a platform really not just around zero trust, but around the assumption that everything you would interact with is already corrupted. It's the thing you should not trust, you should distrust it, right? Yeah. How could we provide full access to the web, regardless of the device, regardless of the network, regardless of the location or the security state of the environment? How could we provide full access, but not expose our users to the risk? And that's where we came up with this idea of isolate the browser out on a disposable server in the cloud, execute all the web code on that server, but give the user a safe display of that web session. It's kind of like the idea of virtualization has been around forever, but I won't use the buzzword. It's kind of like, remember when Netflix started back in the 90s, and you would use Netflix to send CD or DVDs back and forth in the mail. You'd get a DVD from Netflix and you'd install it in your DVD player, and you'd watch the movie and then you'd send it back. Well, now nobody does that with Netflix, or maybe some people do, but most people stream to their devices. That DVD is actually running up on a Netflix server somewhere, and you're just seeing the execution in a display window of that. And that's exactly the environment that we started with in building this company in order to create a zero trust framework. Execute the code on a host that's remote, give a benign, secure, encrypted display of that environment to preserve access without increasing any of the risk. From there, once we have that browser running as a central and managed resource in a secure environment, extending the model to layer in some of those controls that businesses need became a really logical extension. We've done a lot of work around this. We have a lot of patents granted, but we've augmented the browser to include things like a identity and access manager capability, which is a fancy word for password management capability. So administrators can grant and revoke access to web-based applications seamlessly. We've built URL category filtering so that you can block certain types of content for your users or allow certain types of content for others. We've built policy controls that allow restrictions or controls on data upload, data download, copy, paste, etc. And we've built comprehensive audit and oversight controls that allow the browser to become the central record of user activity. So if you're a compliance-focused organization like a healthcare provider or a financial services firm and you're responsible for your users' actions, you can track all that information in one single place. And so it all came from that simple idea of how do we get away from trusting everything? How could we take this assumption that everything was untrustworthy and still preserve access without increasing risk? And that's where we got to this concept of a cloud-based browser with these extended capabilities.
And of course, we are living in an age where user experience is paramount now, and there will be some people listening that still get flashbacks of Norton's antivirus slowing down their machine 15, 20 years ago. So the question I've got to ask is, do users notice any degrading in performance or performance differences when running a browser in the cloud?
Yeah, so the first thing I'd say is user experience is critical, and if we're not performing better than the user's local browser, then customers aren't going to use us, right? It's the appetite for disruption is not very great, particularly in business and as it relates to the desktop. That being said, we are running the browser on another machine. So I guess you would say, do you see a difference when you're streaming a Netflix video versus running it in your DVD? Probably not, but if your cable modem burps, then you would see that effect. But we really strive to make sure that the experience is better from a pure performance perspective. We run on infrastructure delivered by tier 1 providers like Google and Amazon all around the world. The servers where your browser session runs is on a faster machine than you have on your desktop, and the network it's connected to is a way higher network throughput connection than you'd get at home. And you can do things like run speed test and things like that in the session, and you'll see how that's validated. So we really run the browser on an inherently faster infrastructure, and we've done a lot of work to optimize the protocol for delivery of the streaming system. But the interesting thing, Neil, is that once you get over that first, okay, it performs like my browser, it actually starts faster, and it actually executes, maybe a little bit better for rendering some content. But the interesting benefits that we start to open up are well beyond performance. In this idea of Silo, if you think about Silo as my browser that's running up in the cloud, and I'm over at your house, and I'm using your computer because I urgently have to do something. I have to respond to an email, or I have to pay a bill, or I have to update my social feed or something like that. I can use your computer to open a browser, log into the Silo system. It opens up a secure tunnel to our cloud infrastructure. I can access my Silo profile up in the cloud. I can do my work, and I can close the tab, and I can do it without any fear that your machine might have, keylogged what I'm doing, or any fear that your ISP might be looking at the packets as they go by, or that you might look and see what my, browser history is after the fact, because everything that I've done has only been interacting with pixels that are actually controlling the browser running up on the cloud-based server. So you have a 100% secure tunnel up to the environment. You can do your work from any computer without any risk to you losing data, you being surveilled, or me in this instance being surveilled, or risk losing my data. And that's a very holistic kind of approach to this idea of zero trust. I don't need to trust anything, yet I can validate myself, and I can get access to the things that I need to do from any time, from any device, any network, at any time, without risk.
And as a former IT guy that's earned my stripes in the IT battlefield, there's a few questions I'm going to ask now that are from my past, which is, what happens when Dave from marketing says he needs a particular extension in his browser? Or if Steve in the digital team says, well, I need to test multiple browsers to test a company website and how it works across them all. They're typically kind of questions that are going to be fired at IT support teams, I would imagine. How do you get around things like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. There are a number of answers there. First of all, I would say you can decide what Silo is used for. So we are not saying necessarily throw out the browser on your desktop, only use Silo. We certainly have customers who have done that for security reasons, but sometimes there is a legitimate reason to use a local browser. If there is, for instance, a particular marketing tool that has a particular plugin associated with it, and that plugin has either compatibility issues with our platform, or we've not approved that as a plugin for the system for a variety of other reasons, you can still use the local browser. But we do support a variety of very popular plugins, and we give administrators the ability to turn those plugins on or off. Plugins that are associated with various types of media content, Flash or other forms of content can be turned off in the browser. Various formats for audio content, the ability to access certain document types can be enabled or rejected from within the browser. So we give the administrator the controls to change the profile of the browser based on the specific user need. But there may be instances where there is a need to still use the local browser. And what we see our customers do, which is really interesting, is they can start to neck down their exposure. They can just say, Steve in marketing is an exception. He must have this thing running in his browser. Let's lock that browser down to an environment where if it gets infected, because it's touching web code, it's not going to damage anything else. We'll keep the secure, sensitive stuff in a separate environment, typically accessed, by silo. So, we are dealing with a probably the most universally used application in the history of, compute, right? The browser. What are there? 3 billion browser users out there, probably using a variety of browsers themselves. We're not so arrogant to think that our browser is going to replace everybody's browser. What we ask our customers to do is start thinking about where you're at risk. What workflows need to be constrained to an environment that you can get, comprehensive security and policy managed and oversight over, and start trending towards that direction. Some of our customers have been more forward-leaning and have said, I'm going to deprecate the local browser. The only thing I want my users to do is use a silo account, and they're using Microsoft O365 or they're using Google Apps as their corporate workflows, and they have, a completely controlled environment. But I wouldn't say that every one of our customers has made that transformation to complete silo use.
No, I think it's a great idea. And like you said, it's all about minimizing risk. If you're a huge company with 5,000 to 10,000 employees, it seems ludicrous that they've all got access to as many plugins and an open
true.
browser. It's crazy, isn't it?
It is. It's absolutely crazy. And yet we've become accustomed to it, in spite of the headlines that you mentioned, where it's getting worse and worse every day.
Yeah. So for the average user that are going to be using Silo, can you just walk me through some of the security features and how it's reducing risks for organizations?
Yeah, for sure. And the message to the end user might be slightly different than the administrator. For the end user, I would say, look, it's a browser. It runs remotely. It runs on our servers, not your device. So you're inherently anonymous, you're inherently secure, and you can pretty much use any device and get to your profile, and your profile controls are going to follow you. So it's sort of like it's the browser as a service, for lack of a better word, right? You get to access your browser profile from anywhere. So you're not burdened by any single device or anything else. You can get to your environment and continue your work. And we can hold state, we can hold your bookmarks or your credentials or your documents or whatever you wish, depending on your choices. For the administrator, it's a slightly different message. It's a little bit more about IT policies and IT compliance. So, the same inherent, the browser runs remotely, benefits are true. Your users can access it from their home computer. They can access it from their work computer. And there might be a benefit there to embrace BYOD as an example, where there's a user benefit that IT can position. But IT gets the ability to say, I now get to determine exactly how my users interact with the web. If I want to validate users, I want to restrict sites, or I want to constrain the content that they have access to so they can't do anything that might put my business at risk, I can embed those policies directly within the browser. And those browser policies follow them, whether it's a home device or a work device. I can delegate administrators so that I can have help desk administrators or compliance reviewers basically managing the work that my users are doing online. And I'm not doing it with a hodgepodge of 6 or 7 different analytics packages and IT management packages. Everything's baked into the browser, and the administrator gets a simple dashboard for doing those things. Then the last thing I would say is, as the world moves more to the web, and as the devices proliferate, right, and more and more hotspots are persisted and auto joined, this concept of follow me policies without increased risk becomes really empowering. As an IT leader, if I'm thinking about digital transformation trends and webification of all the business applications, how do I handle that in a world where I'm being told also I need to deploy zero trust frameworks, I need to layer in software-defined perimeters, I need to put CASB in place to grab SaaS logs. Like, I've just got another mountain to climb in terms of IT technologies that I need to deploy in order to embrace this next wave of change. The idea of a cloud-based browser where the policies are built into the browser profile and they're available from any device that IT wants to allow the user to access the web from, it becomes a very liberating solution. We allow IT to assert more command and control over what users are doing online and deprecate a bunch of the technologies that they're using today for, maybe I would say less effective cybersecurity and risk management.
And before you came on to talk with me today, I did a little bit of research on Authenticate, and I quickly learned that you guys are looking to establish itself as the Pentagon main supplier of isolated web browser as part of the security overhaul led by the Defense Information Systems Agency. I mean, that sounds fantastic. Can you tell me a little bit more about this? It sounds like a great opportunity.
Yeah. So government's been an early adopter for us, and it's not just the U.S. government. We have a number of European government agencies that are using this as well, and I've been pleasantly surprised to see the aggressive posture that many of these government organizations are taking in trying to secure their environment. Today, we have more than 150 government agencies using us, including all 5 service branches of the U.S. military, right? Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, and Coast Guard. And it's been incredibly gratifying to see whether it's for mission-related work where analysts are collecting packages or profiles associated with threats against the government, or whether it's morale browsing for people that are deployed to hostile environments where they just want to get on Facebook and connect with family or friends. The browser has been a source of shall we say, vulnerability to many of these organizations and cost inefficiencies. And the transition to Silo has been seamless to the user, and we've seen zero remediation events since deploying it in these organizations. We have one specific command part of the U.S. Navy that's been a customer for 3 years. They've been command-wide. They've deprecated access to the internet from a variety of their users' desktops, and they've had zero security remediation events since deploying. So it's just, when you're not letting web code into your environment, the effect is pretty profound in terms of your overall risk profile. But it's not just government. We've also been very successful in the commercial market, and it's especially in the markets where data security and privacy are paramount. And that's the usual suspects of the financial services industry, the legal community, the healthcare industries, where people have GDPR governed organizations are coming online very quickly because of the data privacy issues associated with that and some of the landmark fines that are coming through. So it's been really gratifying to see, led by U.S. government sort of posture, people are starting to realize that there is a way to transfer their risk of the web off of their environment and onto a disposable infrastructure like ours.
And what kind of feedback have you been getting? Are there any particular, obviously it's quite secretive, a lot of the work that you're doing there, but are there any customer stories or use cases that you can share on just the kind of difference that it made with maybe a before and after picture there?
Yeah, so we have a policy that says, we don't name our customers, and we won't name you when you become a customer. And that's really a very personal thing, because I'll say, candidly, many of our customers would not allow us to name them. We have various government agencies and such. But when we thought about this internally, and we started working with the marketing folk, we realized it makes no sense for a customer to highlight what security countermeasures they're taking, because it gives the adversary an advantage. Sure. So we don't tout specific individual case studies and name the customers, but we are working on a variety of what we call anonymous case studies. So our customers will speak on our behalf, but they won't name their affiliation. They'll describe their role, their organization, where it fits in the ecosystem, how their environment was prior to deploying us and what it's been like since, but we will do it in more of an anonymous way. What I can tell you is that our business has been doubling on an annual basis for the last several years, and our retention rate is 99%. We have seen, once customers start using Silo, they just don't turn it off. The use of our product is as diverse as the use of the browser itself. For some of our organizations, it's so employees can get online and get access to personal internet resources without putting the organization at risk or without the organization running afoul of things like GDPR compliance. For many organizations, it's sensitive workflows or compliance workflows. Think about it. As you use a cloud-based banking platform and revenue recognition platform, and you're running a finance organization inside of a company, and you bring outsiders or auditors in, and you need to give them access to your financial package, the last thing you want to do is give them a username and password to your NetSuite or your Intuit QuickBooks or whatever, because who knows what device they're going to use and how are they going to go home and log into that stuff and what's going to happen to your data. So we have a lot of customers that use us as a way to grant and revoke access to some of those sensitive applications and monitor how those users are using their data. And we have other users that are using us in sort of a remote worker fashion when employees go to places like China or other places where they might be subject to particular surveillance. We have a lot of researchers in the journalist space that are using us in environments where they might be subject to nefarious practice. They're using us as a way to get free and anonymous access to the internet so they can do their business. So we're really not defined by one use case, but what I can say is, and that's why we want to get a series of these anonymous case studies out there, but what I can say is our business is growing really well across government and commercial entities. And once customers come on, we do a good enough job of delivering the service, and it works well enough as advertised that they don't switch off.
I've also been seeing that you guys are attending a lot of conferences and trying to get the word out there about the great work that you're doing. So for people listening to this podcast that are listening all over the world who cannot attend some of those events, I want you to try and imagine that they're visiting your booth. I mean, what is the key message that you would want people to walk away with?
Yeah, so if you were to come to our booth, I think you would be refreshed that we're not trying to dazzle you with buzzwords. What we're doing is, what my co-founder and I said in the early days is, we think we're doing something that's obvious in hindsight, right? It's like, it's so obvious. Duh, why didn't it always work that way? What we would say to that person walking up to a trade show booth, it would be something along the lines of, the internet, for all of its benefit, is inherently dangerous. You read about it every day. The underlying technologies were not designed for today's world. The environment has become so complicated and so confusing, and the exploits are so sophisticated that you can really no longer manage your own risk yourself. So instead of using your own computer to access the web and to try to keep it secure and establish all these plugins and do all these things, use our computer. We'll give you a browser that's running securely. We'll give you an encrypted data stream down to your device so you can see what's going on. You can get full access to the internet securely, anonymously, but you've transferred 100% of the risk from your computer to ours. And if you're an IT person, if it's an IT-related show, we'd say, and as an IT manager, you get a single pane of glass for total command and control of how your users are using the web. Whether for personal or business use, you get to get back in control of how the web is used in your business. And everything we do, as we dig into the more technical details, as we dig into the specific, industry-related workflows, from zero trust to data policies to compliance, everything builds on that premise, Neil, which is the internet is dangerous. It's too risky to run on your own device. Use ours.
One thing that would be criminal for me not to bring up, of course, is I always try and talk about the story behind someone's successful tech journey. And one of the things that I've read is that you were the founder of Postini, which was an email web security and archive service, which is owned by Google since 2007. So to go from that to continuing to enjoy amazing success in the field, I've got to ask, for other startup founders and other business leaders listening, what are the biggest lessons that you might have learned along the way, or what do you think your secret to your success is?
There are two questions in there. I'll give you the flip answer first, which is, if you have successful number one, don't do number two. It's too hard. I'm just joking. This has been a longer journey than I thought starting this company, but I must say, in all honesty, it has been more gratifying. What we're doing is so exciting, and the customers we're doing it for and their response to our technology, it's been really incredibly gratifying. The secret to the success, I guess I would say, is probably twofold. The first is, when Postini was started, when I started that company in 99, we looked at the email environment through a completely different filter, which is, how do we use this internet thing as a way to layer in security and data security into an industry standard built around insecure protocols, SMTP, right? That was the protocol that every mail server spoke, and it's inherently unsafe as well. The idea behind Postini was to try to use that protocol to inject our wholesale filtering and content analysis layer between a sender and a receiver so that we could do our work without disrupting the flow of mail. And we built a very nice business around it. And thank you for mentioning that. Google bought the company in 2007, as you said. And I believe at the time that was the second largest acquisition Google had done, well behind YouTube. But still, that's notable. I enjoyed working at Google immensely. I still have a lot of good memories and good connections there. But I wanted to take some of that same thought process around Postini and using the internet as a way to disrupt a current market gone awry and as a way to layer in security and compliance and management capabilities in these inherent and open protocols. Rather than SMTP, looking at the web, it's HTTP and HTML. And so that was really the precursor to starting Authenticate. And I'm happy to say that the core DNA of the company comes from Postini as well. My co-founder and key members of our technical staff are all folk that we had a very long and fruitful run working together at Postini, and I'm delighted to be working with them on this company.
Excellent. Well, I'm conscious we have covered a lot of ground today. So for anyone listening that's going to walk away with even more questions, what's the best way of finding out more information about Authenticate, about the Silo web browser, and the best way, of course, of reaching out and contacting your team if they are left with any questions?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. The plug is simple. Go to www.authenticate.com, and that's the word authentic with the number 8.com. That's our website, but it's not just a regular website. We dive into what industries use us and how the product can be used for specific workflows. But importantly, Neil, right up front, there's a button that says Try Silo Now. And if you click that, we will launch a secure virtual browser for you. We'll give you a little splash screen that'll say, check your IP address and show that you're anonymous. Check your speed test to see how fast the infrastructure is. Try to do a couple of things. Try to download data and see that we have policy controls put in place for certain things. So it'll give people a taste of what the experience is really like right there from our website. And if you like it or you want to talk to us, it's a simple fill out a form or, info@authenticate.com, and we're happy to respond.
Excellent. Well, I'll add those links to the blog post that will accompany this episode. But a big thank you for coming on today. I've really enjoyed chatting with you. And I think because we've talked about cybersecurity and solving real problems without mentioning any buzzwords at all, that's a feat on its own. So yeah. I applaud you for that. And thanks for joining me today. Thank you, Scott.
Cheers. Thank you very much, Neil.
So a big thank you to Scott for coming on and sharing his recipe for success, especially for launching security startups and also shedding light on why, after 30 years after the birth of the World Wide Web, organisations still rely on this outdated tool. And as someone that founded Postini, which was an email web security and archiving service which has been owned by Google since 2007, he's continued to enjoy amazing success in this field. So many valuable takeaways, but I'm curious, what were yours? Had you ever thought about the vulnerabilities of the humble web browser throughout your organisation? Or do you have an alternate viewpoint? Please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. Visit my website, techblogwriter.co.uk, where you can find today's episode and the long list of other episodes that we've recorded. But I hope you found today's episode as valuable as I have, and we'll do it all again tomorrow with another great guest. So a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.